Hey everybody, I want to talk to you about your VO2 max intensity. So you'll notice that you'll see a lot of those intervals within your program, and it's really important that your intensity is not too intense. And with those intervals, you're at a zone 5 effort. So it's above your threshold, your FTP, your anaerobic threshold. It's above that, but it's not too far above that. So these are the challenge of these builds as you accumulate more. And the reason why it's important not to go too far above that is because when you do, you start to stimulate the anaerobic system. Now, there is a time and place for that. For certain types of athletes with certain types of profiles, we do want to stimulate the anaerobic system, but for the most part, with these VO2 max, the purpose of them is to not stimulate the anaerobic system and to hit our top end aerobic capacity, our VO2 max. And so the intensity should feel hard, it should feel intense, but it shouldn't feel like you're going all out. You're better off doing these a little bit below your intensity than going too far above, because when you do that, you stimulate, like I said, the anaerobic system. And what happens there is your body starts to generate lots of lactate that you cannot get rid of, you cannot clear out. We're generating lactate at a constant rate, and as our intensity goes up, that rate starts to increase. And when we can no longer get rid of that lactate, a lot of things happen, but we become less efficient, and we don't want to train ourselves to produce a lot of lactate and to be able to tolerate that. Now, that might sound a little bit contradictory, but here's what happens. If you're a long course triathlete, if you're training for a long course half Ironman and Ironman, if you train your body to deal with high levels of lactate, what's going to happen is you're going to have a false sense of what you can hold for the duration of the race. And this becomes even more important as you go into the Ironman distance. It's still very important for half Ironman, but your body becomes accustomed to dealing with these high levels of lactate. But what's happening within your metabolic system, within your metabolic efficiency to fuel that effort, you're depending on a huge amount of carbohydrates to meet that demand. And we so much so that you most likely will not be able to keep up with the supplementation of that. And so what ends up happening is an intensity that feels maybe moderately comfortable, maybe doesn't feel like a hard push because your body is so accustomed to dealing with high levels of lactate. You hold that pace, but eventually it becomes really difficult and you just start dropping power. Or to hold on to that power becomes extremely difficult. And here's where it gets you. It translates, it comes out on the run. So you may be operating at a deficit, even though you're fueling on a regular basis. You can actually put your body into a deficit. By the time you get on the run, you're in a deficit, and on the run, we cannot take in nearly as many calories as we do on the bike. And so that deficit becomes compounded, and eventually at some point in the run, you start to fade. So all that to say, the intensity of these intervals, you want to make sure that they're just above your zone 4, low zone 5 intensity. If you know your FTP or your anaerobic threshold, you can plan on about 105 to 115%. Some people can go up to 120, but beyond that, it starts to really stimulate the anaerobic system. So we don't want to do that. There is a time and place for that for certain types of athletes, which I'll be explaining in another video. But for the most part, keep the intensity where it's at. If you feel like maybe you're not pushing hard enough, but you don't want to risk going too hard, you can always add more intervals. If you're able to add 2 or 3 more intervals to the mix, then that can be more beneficial for you rather than just going harder for that 5 or 6 intervals that you're doing. Okay, so just wanted to share that with you. Hopefully it's helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm going to be talking a lot about lactate production, because for Ironman distance and half Ironman distance triathletes, this is the key metric that you want to know, and you need to be able to match your intensity with your ideal burn rate at your race pace intensity. So I'll be talking about this. If you have any questions, let me know. Have a good day, and stay tuned for the next workout.